Okay, welcome to another episode of DiResta's Cut. In this episode, I'm going to do a box set for this record compilation by my friend. He owns a record shop called Dope Jams, and he is a DJ. And this is a compilation of a period in time at his record shop. And it's a very well-made, well-designed compilation of pictures and music and some DVDs there. And he wanted a very special box to put it all together in, at least for the very first one for him. And so here I'm in my container, and I found a piece of spalted maple that my friend at Federa Guitars gave me. This piece of maple's got some really nice anomalies in it. The spalting there is those black lines that occur when the wood starts to die. Paul, the person who wants this album compilation box, wanted the box to look old. He says, I want it to look weathered, I want it to look beat up, I want it to look like it has some history before it even has any. And so that's why I picked this, because there's actually some wormholes in it. And as I dig into this piece of wood, I start splitting it up. There's nice grooves and lines buried inside of it. It's really beautiful piece of wood. And it seems to be very, very old. There's something about the smell of it when you cut it. It sort of has like this moldy smell, but kind of like an old book, not necessarily a bad mold. There you could see some real beautiful lines inside there. And so that was the reason why I started with this particular piece of wood, because we're looking for some texture. And this wood certainly has that texture. And so I got off to kind of a bad cut, so I don't really have any really straight lines in all of this split up wood, which I'll fix up later. I wasn't overly concerned because I thought it might add to the vintage look. And now I'm planing all the thicknesses here. This box was inspired by a box I got at the flea market that held an old train part, and it's like basically a big finger jointed box with a sliding lid. That's how I'm going to make this box, with a sliding lid, and that was sort of mimicking the idea of pulling a record out of a record album, which is kind of what made me think of doing it that way. There you see some nice spalting. And I'm just doing a rough cut. I know I need at least 3 layers of wood pieced together to make the top, middle, and bottom of this box idea. And Rockla's giving me some cool stuff to play with, so here I'm experimenting with making these planks at various angles to one another. I didn't want them to all be perfectly flat, which is why I wasn't overly concerned when I was splitting all this wood up. So you have some various angles here and there. I just, again, wanted the box to look old. So I'm making like a sort of a complicated wine box in a way. And you see I have some tapered pieces. And everything's getting glued together, so I'm going to lap joint everything. And right there you see with my router sticking up through the table, I'm using the edge of that router bit there to create some lap joints. And so I lap joint all of these pieces, and everything's rough cut right now. I'm just making broad panels so that I know I have enough material to make the top, middle, and bottom. I tape them together, and then as I glue them, I just split open the joint that's getting glued, and then I just let them lay flat on these cardboard pieces overnight. This wood has a really tight grain. I think it's spalted maple. If anybody has any ideas that it could be something else, let me know, because it was kind of waxy. Not necessarily what you would expect from a maple. And here I'm just edge planing. These are the actual parts that are going to become the girth of the box. That's why these are all perfectly level to one another. And right here I'm making the joint for the sliding lid. I make 2 here on camera, but I actually made 3. And here you see that's the bottom of the saw blade leaves that little V mark, so I have to cut it out with a chisel. So I bottom out the hole, and then I use a file to make sure it's nice and square. So since I'm making a sliding lid, there's going to be actually 3 sides with a groove, and when you see me put the box together. And then one side is going to have to be cut to accommodate the sliding lid, and that's why I did that, because the lid is going to be the width of all the boards. And now here you see me compiling all the pieces together to make up the box. And you have 3 sides with this slot, and then one side is lower to accept the width of the lid that slides in there. Just clamp it up. And I didn't do finger joints at the request of the client. he asked me to just try and figure out something else, and so I glued it all together, and you see me later on I used bamboo nails. Now this is the bottom, and I've made boxes like this before, and these pieces of wood may have a tendency to expand, so I did not glue this bottom in, and I also gave it a little bit of breathing room. So it looks like it fits nice and snugly, but it fit a little loose, especially in the direction of the grain, the way the grain could expand like a tabletop. So I left a little bit of airspace, and I never did actually glue it in, because if it did expand, all of a sudden the box would become all cockeyed. And this is going to be the sliding lid, and so I'm routing in a tongue, so I approach from both sides of the planer. And here I'm just using a shoulder plane just to adjust it, because it didn't fit perfectly. So I'm just taking little passes to get it to fit nice and snugly and perfectly. And there you see the three sides surrounded the lid, slides on and off. And right now the bottom is just held in place with friction, but what you see me doing here is I'm using these bamboo skewers glued into place, and initially just put a couple of small air nails in there just to keep this together while the glue is drying. And now the bamboo is really going to do the heavy lifting. I was also hoping that they would show a little bit. They kind of got lost in the mix once the box was finished, but I was hoping that they would show a little bit more. And actually, you could see here it is. Here I'm putting in the bamboo skewers to hold the bottom in. And this is the only source of fastening to keep the bottom in. I did that on all four sides with just a little bit of glue to keep the pegs in. So that bottom has the ability to breathe a little bit. And when you notice the way right there you see me trimming off the excess, I left the lid long just so that I could bring it right up to the surface there. And just a few final passes with a small plane. But you'll notice the lid is in the direction that the grain will expand, so that if it does expand, it won't become a tight joint. If the lid expands, it'll expand off the edge there. And now here you see me putting in the interior parts that are going to make up the inside of the box. And we needed a place for the DVD to live, and I put it under there, and then also I was able to rock that center panel against it to get the albums out. You'll see what I mean. And here I'm making a stage for the magic wand. The magic wand is part of the story that goes on inside that compilation with all the photographs and stuff. And you see me just closing up. I went in there with the bandsaw. Now I'm closing up my entryway, sanding up this joint. Then I'm going to put a bottom on it. And there I just glue a sliver of the original cut up piece. I ended up with this sliver, and I knew I might use it somehow, and here it came in perfect. And because this center panel has to rock on those chunks of wood I put in the very bottom, I put some spacers in it, and that's what you see that's what you see these spacers are for. So everything fits right on top of that. So when I rock it, it has a place to sit evenly. Everything gets stacked. And now on top of this, the rest of the records get stacked. And getting back to the theme of keeping things looking old and weathered, I just used some Minwax Stain, and before it even dried I began to scrape it off. Just use a razor blade and just began scraping it off. So all of a sudden I get some really nice textures. There's a couple of pieces of glue joints that are showing, which I wasn't overly concerned about, because again I wanted this to look like something that you might have found at an antique shop. I'm using a wire brush to dig out some of those wormholes. And now I'm going to put some graphics on it. Holden Screen Supply is a place I've been going to for 30 years since I was a student. And you bring them a graphic, or nowadays you email them a graphic, and they will make a silk screen for you overnight, or the same day if you get it in early enough. They're here in Tribeca. And now I set this up so that I didn't have anything slip sliding around, and I did a couple of primer prints. That's just to get the screen wet, just on scrap cardboard. And I went for it, pick it up slow, and I got a pretty decent print. And I knew the print wasn't going to be perfect because that surface wasn't perfect, but again, that's what we're going for, some planned imperfection. This is the spine. I just went for it. If it didn't work out, I would have just wiped it off with a soapy rag and did it again. But the first pass was perfect. I printed the front, I printed the spine, and now I'm going to use a third graphic on the back. And there was a bunch of wormholes right there. I went right over it though. Kind of added to the imperfect look, or the imperfect look of it. And I put some finishing wax on everything. It had its own waxy feel anyway. Like I said, this wood seemed to telegraph through all the finishes. It just feels nice and strong and slick. But the wax just helped it. And I didn't put a little thumb niche or anything on this for the lid to open up. I just wanted it to be sort of, if you knew how to do it, you do it. If you don't, you kind of have to figure it out. And it just sort of adds to the mystery of the compilation, the box, the imagery. And I'm just checking everything. Everything works good. Careful I don't cast a spell with that wand. And there it is. I'm very happy with the final look. It seems to really be exactly what Paul was asking for. And there you have it. And just to finish things off, just put my name on the bottom. I don't put my name on everything, only the things I'm really proud of. So, there you go. Thank you for watching.